The recycle bin in Windows. You use it every day, but there's quite a bit more to it than you probably realize. Some of it just interesting, others pretty useful, and that's what we're going to go over today. So starting off with number one is a setting for the recycle bin that is a lie. And there's not many settings, but to get to the ones that are there, you go to right-click it, and then properties, and here they are. And what you want to take a look at is this custom size, maximum size setting. And most of the time, people assume that this is the maximum size of the recycle bin as a whole, and if you have too many files in there, it exceeds it, it'll delete some to free up space. But that's not actually the case. This setting is actually just the maximum size of any individual file, and above this threshold, that is when it will warn you about a file size being too big and will skip the recycle bin. That's all this setting does. And you can see this if I set the max size to something small like 10 megabytes. If I then go and delete something that's only about 20 megabytes, then it will warn me and say too big and immediately skip the recycle bin. But if I go into the recycle bin, you can see that there are a bunch of files that are smaller than 10 that add up to above that, and they're still in there. It's not like it's deleting them, and I have several other files that I deleted before changing this setting, and it hasn't gotten rid of those at all. So next up, number two, is a way you can have Windows automatically manage the recycle bin size, at least in some capacity. And that is through a feature called Storage Sense in Windows 10 and 11. In Windows 11, for example, you can get to it by going into the settings, then under System, go to Storage, and then Storage Sense. And for Windows 10, it's also under storage settings. And in here, there's a few options, but the relevant one is to delete files in the recycle bin that are older than a certain number of days. But keep in mind, this is only going to happen when the storage sense feature itself runs. So you have to make sure you set that to run on a schedule, and then every time it does, it'll check for files older than 30 days and delete it. It's not like it's constantly running in the background checking. It's like a every time it runs thing. Alright, moving on into the recycle bin interface itself, you might not realize there are two special columns in here that are unique to the recycle bin interface that are the date deleted column and original location column. Pretty self-explanatory why they're here, but these are not viewable anywhere else in File Explorer, which kind of makes sense, but you can enable them, and it makes it easy to clear out files on different drives that you may have deleted, or free up space just on a specific drive by deleting the recycle bin files on there. Next up, you might not realize that this recycle bin folder that comes up when you click it on the desktop is not actually a real folder. It's a virtual folder that is like a front-end interface to what the actual recycle bin folder is behind the scenes. And in reality, the recycle bin directory is a hidden system file directory in the root level of each drive. So each drive has its own recycle bin, and it's called $recycle.bin. You won't be able to see this if you just have regular hidden files enabled. You have to actually go into the settings to show system hidden files as well. If you look in there, you're going to see several folders that begin with like an S, and these have to do with usernames. There's like one that's the default system one. I think it's more of a placeholder. There might be more than a couple depending on how many users you have, that sort of thing. And usually if you try to access this, you're not going to be able to enter it through File Explorer without changing around the permissions. However, through some means, if you were able to look into these folders, you would see that there are a bunch of seemingly randomly named files, not anything like what you might have deleted. And that's because when a file gets deleted, it basically does get moved into this folder. Technically, I'll put on screen what happens, but you can think of it like it gets moved and renamed to a $ with an R and then like some random string that's probably a hash actually having to do with the file. But also there's a corresponding metadata file created for each deleted item that starts with a $ and then an I, and this contains info like the original file location, the date deleted, stuff like that. And I believe this is the case because if it just kept the same file name that it had originally, then it might mess things up if you're trying to delete a bunch of files from different directories with the same name. If they all try to go into the same place, that could cause problems, so it probably just gives everything a unique name. Alright, next up, sort of related to this, because files are actually in this hidden folder, technically when you delete and recycle a file, Unless you empty the recycle bin or delete it from the recycle bin, any file in there is still going to take up space on your hard drive. So if you see that your space on your drive is running out and you go and delete a bunch of files and send them to the recycle bin and it doesn't help, then you probably realized you actually have to get rid of the stuff in the recycle bin to free up the space. Now, something else that would be nice to get rid of is all your personal data out there being sold by sketchy online data brokers. But the way to stop it is today's sponsor, Delete Me, a data privacy service to which I myself have been a paying customer for over 3 years now, long before they ever sponsored. If you've ever Googled yourself, you definitely have seen the countless so-called data broker websites who not only collect and display all your personal information, like name, address, and phone number, but even sell it to companies to do whatever they want with. This also makes it easier for malicious people to find and use your own info against you in phishing attacks and more. But that's where Delete Me comes in. They do all the work for you in submitting removal requests on your behalf. And new data brokers pop up all the time, so Delete Me is constantly adding new ones and continue to monitor them and repeat removals if your info shows up on a site again, which can happen a lot. At the moment, they automatically scan 132 data brokers, and you'll get a privacy report for which sites you were removed from after 7 days and every 3 months after that. So you can see exactly which sites are clean and which ones have removals in progress. But you can also submit custom requests to remove any data from hundreds of other sites, even surprising ones, like berkeley.edu, for example, I always give. It's not even a data broker, but Delete Me will still help you get removed if you're on there for some reason. So if you want to get your personal information removed from the web and search results, go to joindeleteme.com/ThioJoe and use the promo code ThioJoe for a nice discount. And with all that being said, let's continue. Some other random fun facts, you might know this, but there's different icons for the recycle bin depending on whether it's empty or not. So these are the different icons for Windows 11. This is what it is for Windows 10, for example. There's also this icon version with the red X on it. I've never actually seen it, but apparently, based on the registry, it might show up in File Explorer somewhere. So if you know where this comes from, let us know in the comments. You can actually customize these icons yourself by going to Personalization Settings, then Desktop Icon Settings. And you can also set custom icons for a few other things here too, or hide them from the desktop completely. Next, if you wanted, you can actually disable the recycle bin completely. It was in that Properties Settings window we saw before, and you could just uncheck this setting to use the recycle bin, and now anything you delete will be permanent right away. Next, one interesting thing I found is there doesn't seem to be any official way in Windows via a command prompt command to delete things to the recycle bin. If you use like the del command, that just immediately deletes it permanently. You can do it with PowerShell, though even that takes some special modules you might have to install or a script, and obviously there's tools out there that can do it via the Windows API, but as for an easy built-in way, there's not really anything. Another interesting fact is usually the recycle bin is not going to be enabled for removable drives. Like you use a thumb drive, you plug it in, you delete a file on it. It's not going to create a recycle bin. However, you can actually enable it on removable drives through the registry. Basically, there's just a certain place in the registry where you create a key called recycle bin drives and set it to a certain value, and then it'll just work how it normally would on other drives on removable drives, if you wanted to do that. Speaking of the registry, one fun fact is behind the scenes, the recycle bin is referred to as the bit bucket. And in the registry, the settings for each individual volume for the recycle bin is in this registry path that ends in bit bucket. And then you can see that each ID for each drive has its own settings, including nuke on delete, so that's the setting whether or not to actually use the recycle bin for that drive, and then also max capacity, which again is that incorrectly described setting. This is not the max capacity of the drive, which this is an even worse name for it. Again, it's just for an individual file, so I don't know if that's like just a bug that's been there so long that it's just how it works now, but yeah, that's what that is. Next up, remember how I talked about the recycle bin being a virtual folder, and you can actually create a shortcut directly to this virtual folder. You can obviously do it the normal way, which is to right-click the icon on the desktop and hit Create Shortcut, or you could do it this way, which is to create a shortcut with the command to run Explore, and then the shell name, or the shell CLS ID, it's called. There's two ways. One of these is shell:"recycle bin folder," that's like the named version, and the CLS ID version is shell, and then 3 colons, and then this big, long CLS ID, though it's probably easier to remember the first one. And you can also use these commands to open the recycle bin from like a command prompt or the run command, for example. example, so it might be useful more than just creating a shortcut. And another fun thing we could look at is the icons for the recycle bin, which has evolved over time. So we already saw Windows 10 and 11, but I went and collected the icons from other Windows version installations, and you can see here we have ones for Vista and 7, then XP, and even like 2000 and Windows 98. So I'd be curious to know which of these is your personal favorite. I think I like the Windows 10 one better than Windows 11, but something about the Windows 7 and Vista just looks nice. So maybe it's just nostalgia. Also, apparently there are unused versions of the recycle bin that were used in like beta builds, and there was one in an early build of Windows 10 that was like a flat icon. It wasn't even 3D at all, that I found on this website that has a bunch of different icons. And another fun fact is, if you look in the DLLs for Windows in the installation directory, there still is in there the recycle bin icon for Windows 98 for some reason, the tiny one, the like 48 pixels. So I don't know why, but that's still in there, just for historical purposes, I guess. So again, let me know which is your favorite, and also which of these fun facts you guys didn't know, or maybe already knew, or maybe your mind was blown that that setting you thought was one thing is not actually what it is. Thanks again to Delete Me for sponsoring, and again, if you want to have your personal info removed from data brokers, go to joindeleteme.com/ThioJoe and use the promo code ThioJoe for a discount. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a big giant thumbs up for the YouTube algorithm, and if you want to keep watching, the next video I'd recommend is where I talked about shortcut link files in Windows. They're not as simple as you think either, so I'll put that link right there you can click on. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.